If we could choose the main phrase of the last 5 years in the world, it would undoubtedly be nuclear weapons. Obviously, Russia's war against Ukraine, given that it has not gone at all according to the Kremlin's plan, has intensified nuclear blackmail and intimidation. One would think that in 2025, when the world should be moving toward disarmament, more and more countries are instead seeking to acquire nuclear status. By the way, Ukraine was once a nuclear country too. However, Ukraine had the Budapest Memorandum, which guaranteed its security and territorial integrity. And now 30 years have passed. Ukraine no longer has nuclear weapons, and one of the guarantors of that very Budapest Memorandum has occupied our lands, while the other guarantors limited themselves to political condemnations but did nothing to act on it decisively. However, now that Ukraine has already survived the invasion of one of the strongest armies and joining NATO no longer seems like such an impossible prospect, rumors have emerged that the main guarantee for Ukraine will be the creation of its own nuclear bomb. Or maybe, is it something else? Let's figure it out together. Hello everyone, my name is Anastasiia Husarieva. Now we're going to figure out all the details together, and in the meantime, subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and write in the comments what you think. Is it really possible to create your own nuclear bomb in today's world without objections from other countries? So, let's get started. In the context of an ongoing war, the lack of clear prospects for joining NATO and uncertainty about long-term support from Western partners in the public sphere, once again, there are discussions that creating its own nuclear weapons could become an alternative option for Ukraine, a form of security guarantee. How realistic is such a scenario? And could it really change the country's strategic position? These are questions that are being raised more and more often in global media and among expert circles. The situation on the battlefield, the fatigue of Western societies from the protracted conflict, and ongoing debates about the scale of aid to Ukraine are pushing Kyiv to seek those very unconventional solutions. One of the most radical and at the same time most discussed ideas has been the restoration of nuclear capability. In recent months, reports that the Ukrainian side is allegedly considering such a possibility have reappeared in the media. However, there is a significant gap between theoretical discussion and practical implementation. In October 2024, Julian Röpke, an analyst for the German publication Bild, wrote that the Ukrainian authorities are seriously considering the possibility of restoring their nuclear arsenal. On the same day, a meeting of the European Council took place in Brussels, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky articulated a key thesis at a press conference. Ukraine's security can be guaranteed either by NATO membership or by possessing nuclear weapons. In his speeches, Zelensky also mentioned a recent conversation with Donald Trump, during which they discussed issues related to NATO, the Budapest Memorandum, and the consequences of Ukraine giving up its nuclear status. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, he outlined the dilemma directly. Either Ukraine acquires nuclear weapons as a means of self-defense, or it joins an effective military alliance. At the same time, the president emphasized that Kyiv's choice is NATO, not nuclear weapons, since the countries of the alliance are at war and provide security for their citizens. According to him, Trump acknowledged that Ukraine's arguments were fair. From a formal point of view, Ukraine could indeed claim the right to restore its nuclear status, even after 2014, when its territorial integrity was violated. The signatories of the Budapest Memorandum did not fulfill their obligations, which called into question the very value of this document. From a moral standpoint, Kyiv's arguments also appear logical. However, in practice, the actual implementation of such an initiative faces a whole range of serious problems. The publications by Bild, claiming that Ukraine could allegedly produce a nuclear bomb within a few weeks, citing an unnamed official, look more like an informational bluff. Even with scientific knowledge, the key issue remains the availability of materials. In 2010, President Viktor Yanukovych transferred the last 50 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that Ukraine possessed to Russia. This decision was positively received. The USA, at the time, Barack Obama stated that Ukraine had made a unique contribution to global nuclear disarmament, assuring that security guarantees remained in force. The real events of the following years showed just how formal those assurances turned out to be. Ukraine has significant reserves of uranium ore, but does not produce nuclear fuel. This is essential for creating an atomic bomb. The necessary isotopes are uranium-235 or uranium-233, enriched to about 90%. The mere presence of raw materials does not solve the problem. A complex infrastructure is required, including modern centrifuges, technology, and of course, time. Nuclear weapons as an alternative to NATO membership may seem like a conceptually attractive idea. However, in reality, it contains far too many contradictions. Even if we disregard the negative international reaction, the idea of creating an atomic bomb in a matter of weeks does not stand up to criticism. Theoretically, Ukraine might be capable of developing weapons of mass destruction, but this would require years, significant resources, stable funding, advanced scientific and technological potential, and a high level of state coordination. It should also be noted that Ukraine's financial situation remains extremely difficult. The state is experiencing a shortage of funds even to supply the army with conventional weapons, which forces the government to, for example, raise taxes. Under such circumstances, funding an expensive nuclear project seems highly unrealistic. The creation of nuclear weapons is not a one-time act, but a lengthy and prolonged process. The state of public administration deserves special attention. Corruption, administrative chaos, and a lack of professional personnel significantly complicate the implementation of any complex projects. A nuclear program requires clear coordination between the scientific community, the military, and political leadership, as well as the availability of reliable delivery systems. A telling example of problems with the use of human capital was the death of Serhiy Cherednik, a leading engineer at the Institute for Nuclear Research, who died while carrying out a combat mission. This case became a symbol of how specialists who could be crucial for those very strategic programs end up on the front lines. Such an approach calls into question the possibility of quickly implementing complex scientific and technical projects. Undoubtedly, nuclear status can serve as a deterrent, a kind of guarantee. However, Ukraine is in a state of active war, and this must be taken into account. The emergence of nuclear weapons during active hostilities is unlikely to change their dynamics. Moreover, the use of weapons of mass destruction requires political will, a political decision. The question remains open whether the country's leadership is ready to give the order to use them, especially given Russia's large nuclear arsenal and the risk of retaliatory strikes. Against this backdrop, the mood of Ukrainian society is particularly telling. According to a survey conducted by InfoSapiens in November 2025 at the request of the New Europe Center, 31.1% of respondents consider the development of nuclear weapons to be the best security guarantee. Support for joining NATO has dropped to 19.4%, while less than 12% of respondents consider the deployment of foreign troops or a defense alliance with the United States to be effective measures. Paradoxically, the Ukrainian idea of nuclear deterrence is also supported by former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. After the US operation in Venezuela, he stated that this example allegedly proves the necessity for a state to possess a nuclear arsenal as a guarantee of protection against external interference, completely ignoring contradictions and possible parallels. Discussions about nuclear weapons in Ukraine have been ongoing for more than a year. In May 2025, Forbes analyzed a hypothetical Ukrainian Manhattan Project. Alexander Bolfras, an expert at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, considered this scenario solely from the perspective of possible consequences. In his assessment, any attempts by Ukraine to develop nuclear weapons would inevitably be detected by the IAEA, and withdrawal from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty would be a de facto admission of such intentions. Bolfras emphasizes that all nuclear materials in Ukraine are under strict international control, and any deviations will be detected and reported to Russia. Under these circumstances, the likelihood of a preemptive strike on potential targets increases sharply. Despite the absence of official plans, the very fact that the nuclear issue is being discussed causes concern in Moscow. The media have also mentioned one of the options for a peace agreement, which envisions Ukraine's non-nuclear status in exchange for guarantees of sovereignty. It is quite likely that Russia insisted on including this provision in the agreement, recalling Zelensky's speeches in 2022 at the Munich Security Conference. At that time, the president announced that he would initiate negotiations among the participants of the Budapest Memorandum regarding security guarantees for Ukraine, and if the negotiations did not take place, Kyiv would question the decision to give up nuclear weapons. In exchange for giving up the world's third largest nuclear arsenal, Ukraine received security guarantees. We no longer have these weapons. We also do not have security. Nor do we have part of our country's territory, which, by the way, is larger in area than Switzerland, the Netherlands, or Belgium. And most importantly, we have lost millions of our citizens. Citizens of Ukraine, said then President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. At that time, the president also initiated consultations within the framework of the Budapest Memorandum. And in the event that the meeting did not take place, which, by the way, it did not, Ukraine would have every right to consider the Budapest Memorandum as no longer functioning, and all the package agreements of 1994 were called into question. At present, there has been a new turn in this story. Let's see where all this will lead, shall we? I look forward to your thoughts in the comments, and of course, I'll be waiting for you on our broadcasts. Take care of yourselves, wash your hands with soap. Bye, everyone.